started with a smell. For nearly 6 years, the neighbors on F Street in Sacramento had been complaining about something. A sweet, heavy odor that drifted from the backyard of the Victorian house on the corner. Some described it as rotting fruit. Others said it reminded them of something they couldn't quite name. When they asked the elderly woman who lived there, she always had the same answer. She told them it was the fertilizer, fish emulsion, for her roses. And because she was small and gentle and somewhere in her late 50s, with gray hair she refused to die, and a soft voice that made people lean in to listen, no one ever pressed her on it. She baked, she gave gifts, she paid her rent on time, she let the local homeless community sleep on her porch when it got cold. But by the time investigators began digging in that yard, in November of 1988, there would be 7 bodies buried beneath the soil where she grew her flowers. And the woman who put them there would already be gone. This is the story of one of the most disturbing serial killer cases in American history. A case built not on rage or impulse or madness, but on something far quieter. A case in which the killer was invited in, welcomed, trusted, sent referrals by the very system that was supposed to protect the people she was hunting. She wasn't a stranger in the shadows. She was the landlady. Dorothea Puente was born Dorothea Helen Gray in 1929. By the time she was a teenager, both of her parents were dead. She bounced between relatives, marriages, and identities. She married 4 times. She changed her name. She lied about her age. She lied about her past. She told people she was a doctor. She told people she had survived the Bataan Death March. None of it was true. What was true is that she had a long, documented history of taking advantage of people who had nowhere else to go. In 1978, 10 years before the bodies were found, she was already a convicted felon. The charge: forging and cashing 34 state and federal benefit checks belonging to the elderly and disabled tenants under her care. She served time. She was placed on parole. She was specifically forbidden by the terms of that parole from handling government checks or running a boarding house for vulnerable adults. And the moment she got out, she did both. She rented a 2-story Victorian at 1426 F Street. The downstairs became a boarding house. The upstairs she kept for herself. The neighborhood was rough but recovering. The clientele was exactly what she wanted: alcoholics, the mentally ill, the forgotten, the kind of people whose disappearance would not raise questions. Social workers across Sacramento began referring their hardest cases to her, people they couldn't place anywhere else. She accepted them all. She fed them. She gave them clothing. She offered to manage their finances so they wouldn't lose their checks to addiction or confusion. By the mid-1980s, Dorothea Puente was known throughout the local social services system as a quiet miracle, a grandmother figure who took in society's most invisible people. What no one realized was that the invisible people were dying. The first to die was a woman named Ruth Monroe. Ruth was 61 years old. She was Dorothea's friend, her business partner, and at the time, her best friend in the world. She had moved into the upstairs apartment in the spring of 1982 because her husband was terminally ill and she needed somewhere to stay close to the hospital. 3 weeks later, Ruth was dead. The coroner ruled it a suicide, an overdose of codeine and Tylenol. Dorothea told investigators that Ruth had been deeply depressed about her husband's illness. It was a believable story. There was no autopsy that examined the timeline of when the drugs entered her system. No deeper look into the woman who had been sleeping just one floor away. Ruth's family didn't believe it. They knew her. They said she would never have killed herself. They begged the police to look closer. The police closed the case. It would be another 9 years before Ruth Monroe's name reappeared in a homicide file. A few weeks after Ruth's death, a 74-year-old man stumbled into a Sacramento police station and told officers that the woman who ran the boarding house on F Street had drugged him and stolen his money. That complaint resulted in the 1978 parole violation. It sent Dorothea Puente to prison. But it didn't connect the dots. No one looked back at Ruth. No one wondered who else might have been in that house. By 1985, Dorothea was out again, back at 1426 F Street, back to her routine. And in the fall of that year, she met a man named Everson Gilmouth. Everson was 77, a widower, a retiree from Oregon who had come to Sacramento looking for a fresh start. He met Dorothea through a personal ad. Within weeks, they were engaged. Within months, his pension checks were being deposited into a joint account she controlled. And then, sometime in late 1985, Everson disappeared. Not in a way anyone noticed. Not at first. Dorothea told his sister he had moved away with her. She mailed handwritten letters in his name. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, all forged, all convincing. The sister kept writing back, unaware that the man she was writing to had been dead for months. In early November of 1985, Dorothea hired a handyman named Ismael Flores to do some work around the house. As payment, she gave him a wood-paneled pickup truck. It belonged to Everson. She told Flores that her boyfriend had died and left it to her. Then she asked him for one more favor. She needed help moving a large wooden box. It was heavy, about 300 pounds. She didn't say what was in it. She said it contained books and old belongings she wanted to take to a storage unit. She gave him directions. They drove together, the box rattling in the back, north of Sacramento toward the river. Then she changed her mind. She told him to leave the box on the riverbank. Just dump it. She didn't want it anymore. He did what she said. On January 1st, 1986, a fisherman walking along the Sacramento River near the town of Verona spotted the box on the bank. The wood was warped from the rain. The lid had loosened. There was a smell. Inside, wrapped in plastic bags and a bed sheet, sealed with electrical tape, packed with mothballs and toilet deodorizer to mask the odor, was the badly decomposed body of a man. There were no documents inside, no identification, no clothing tags, nothing to suggest who he was or where he had come from. The body would remain unidentified for nearly 3 years. For Dorothea, it was a perfect crime. She kept cashing Everson Gilmouth's pension checks until July of 1986. She kept writing his sister, she kept the house running, and in the months that followed, she began doing it again. And again, and again. Leona Carpenter, 78 years old, a frail woman who had already paid for her own funeral. Dorothy Miller, 64, a veteran, Benjamin Fink, 55, a former sailor and alcoholic who used to make everyone in the house laugh, James Gallup, 62. He used to help Dorothea with chores around the property. Vera Faye Martin, 64, Betty Palmer, 78, and one more, the youngest of them. A man whose disappearance eventually would bring everything crashing down. His name was Alvaro Montoya. Everyone called him Bert. Bert Montoya was 51 years old in 1988. He had been born in Costa Rica. He had spent most of his adult life on the streets of Sacramento, struggling with schizophrenia, sleeping in shelters when he could find space, often unable to speak more than a few words at a time. People described him as a gentle bear of a man, sweet, large, almost silent, the kind of person who could vanish from the world without anyone noticing. His social worker noticed. Her name was Judy Moise. She had been working with Bert for a long time. She knew his history, she knew his patterns, and in February of 1988, when she was looking for a stable place to put him, she did what other social workers had done before he won R. She placed him with Dorothea Puente. For months, Bert seemed to be doing better than he had in years. He was clean, he was fed, he had a room. When Judy visited, Dorothea served coffee in the front parlor and described his progress in soft, motherly tones. Bert sat quietly in the corner. He looked well, and then in late summer he was gone. Judy noticed she wasn't seeing him at their regular meetings. She called the house. Dorothea told her Bert had gone to visit family in Mexico. Then she said Utah. Then she said his brother-in-law had come to pick him up. The stories didn't match. Judy knew something else too. Bert didn't have a brother-in-law. He had no real family contact. He couldn't travel alone. He could barely cross a street alone. She pressed for more information. Dorothea grew vaguer. Then a few days later, Judy received a phone call from a man who introduced himself as Bert's brother-in-law, calling to say Bert was fine. The man, in his nervousness, gave his real name. It wasn't a family member at all. It was another homeless man Dorothea had paid to make the call. That was the moment Judy Moise knew, with absolute certainty, that something was wrong. On November 7th, 1988, she filed a missing person report. 4 days later, on November 11th, Detective John Cabrera of the Sacramento Police Department walked up to the front porch of 1426 F Street. What he found was not what he expected. He expected to interview a suspect. Instead, he found a small, white-haired woman in a flowered dress who invited him in, offered him coffee, and answered every question without hesitation.
Okay, Dorothea, first question is, how long have you actually lived at that residence?
I think I moved there in 78, but I was in prison I was incarcerated from May the 19th.
She seemed genuinely confused about the concern. Bert had left, she said. He was an adult. He came and went as he pleased. Cabrera would later say he had to remind himself again and again that this woman might be capable of something terrible. She did not look the part. She did not act the part. She was in every way the kind of person you instinctively wanted to help. But as he walked through the house, something else happened. Another tenant, a man named John Sharp, walked past Cabrera in the hallway. Without speaking, he pressed a small folded piece of paper into the detective's hand. Cabrera waited until he was outside to read it. 5 words. She is making me lie. The next morning, Cabrera came back. This time, he brought a search team. He asked Dorothea if they could dig in the yard. She said yes. She poured them coffee. She told them to take their time. She told them where the soil had been recently turned. 30 minutes into the dig, the first shovel struck something solid. It was the body of Leona Carpenter. What happened next is one of the most remarkable failures in the history of American policing. While officers stood in the yard, photographing remains, calling for more units, beginning the process of treating the property as a homicide scene, Dorothea Puente walked out onto the porch in her purple coat and asked Detective Cabrera if she could leave the house for a few minutes. She had a coffee date, she said, with her nephew. At a hotel just a few blocks away, she wasn't under arrest. He let her go. By the time officers realized what had happened, Dorothea Puente was on a bus to Los Angeles. By nightfall, she had checked into a small motel under a false name. The body count in her backyard was still climbing. 7 bodies in total would be pulled from that small patch of soil. Some had been buried in clothes, some in sheets. One of them, 64-year-old Vera Martin, was wearing a wristwatch when investigators uncovered her. The watch was still ticking. Inside the house, detectives found bottles of Delmain, a powerful prescription sedative. They found alcohol mixed with crushed pills. They found financial records showing that even after these people were dead, Dorothea was still receiving and cashing their Social Security checks. Some had been deposited into her account for years. In total, investigators estimated she had stolen tens of thousands of dollars from her victims. But it wasn't really about the money. The money was the byproduct. The killing was the system. What she wanted was control over people who could not fight back. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Dorothea was already looking for her next victim. She found him at a bar near her motel. His name was Charles Wilg. He was a 68-year-old retiree, lonely, recently widowed, the exact profile she had spent her life learning to read. She introduced herself as Donna Johansson. They talked for hours. She told him about her late husband. She told him she was looking for someone reliable to share expenses with. She invited him for dinner. He went home that night thinking he might have just met someone special. The next morning he turned on the television. A face he had just spent the evening with was on the news. A nationwide manhunt. 7 bodies in Sacramento. A serial killer on the run. Charles called CBS. CBS sent a reporter named Gene Silver. Silver came to his apartment. They contacted Los Angeles police together. That afternoon on November 16th, 1988, Dorothea Puente was arrested at her motel without incident. She was wearing red. She did not resist. She told the officers calmly that they had the wrong person. She would tell that to everyone who asked. For the next 23 years. The trial began in 1992. It lasted nearly a year. The jury heard from former tenants, social workers, handymen, neighbors, family members. They heard testimony about the smell, about the wooden box, about the forged letters, about Bert Montoya's gentle silence. They heard from Dorothea herself, who maintained calmly and consistently that every single person who died in her house had died of natural causes. She had simply been afraid to report the deaths because of her parole. She had buried them, she said, out of fear, not malice. It took the jury more than 30 days to reach a verdict, one of the longest deliberations in California murder trial history. In the end, they convicted her of 3 counts of first-degree murder. They could not reach a unanimous verdict on the other 6. There was no surveillance footage, no witnesses to the moment of death, no confession. It was enough. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. She was sent to the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. She would live there for another 17 years. She corresponded with true crime writers. She gave interviews. She published a cookbook of her favorite recipes. She continued until the day she died to insist she had never killed anyone. On March 27, 2011, Dorothea Puente died of natural causes in her cell. She was 82 years old. The house at 1426 F Street is still standing. In the years since the murders, it has been bought and renovated. The new owners have hosted tours. There are signs on the lawn, tongue-in-cheek warnings about being drugged and buried in the yard. People drive past slowly, some take pictures. The roses still bloom every spring. For the families who lost someone in that house, none of it has ever been resolved. Ruth Monroe's relatives never saw justice. Everson Gilmouth's sister had been writing letters to a dead man for nearly 3 years before the truth came out. Bert Montoya's social worker, Judy Moise, would carry the weight of having placed him in that house for the rest of her life, even though everyone who knew her said the same thing. She was the only one who looked for him. She was the reason anyone found out at all. There is one detail from the case that has never quite left the investigators who worked it. When Detective Cabrera first sat across from Dorothea Puente in her front parlor, before he knew anything about the bodies in the garden, he asked her gently if she had anything to do with Bert Montoya's disappearance. She looked at him with watery eyes. She told him she was sorry. For a moment, he believed her. He said it later in interviews, on camera more than once. There was something in her face that seemed genuinely contrite. It took him years to understand what she was actually sorry for. She wasn't sorry for the people she killed. She was sorry she had been caught. 7 of them lie now in cemeteries across California. 2 were buried by their families. 5 were buried by the state. For most of them, no one came to claim the body. For most of them, the death certificate was the only document with their name on it that anyone in the world still cared about. They were people the system had already begun to forget. She knew that. That was why she chose them. And in the end, perhaps the most chilling thing about the case of Dorothea Puente is not what she did. It is how easy she made it look. How a woman with a documented criminal record, on parole, forbidden from doing the very thing she was doing, could spend 6 years killing the people social workers sent to her door. How the smell coming from her garden could be explained away with a single word about fertilizer. How 7 bodies could lie in a yard the size of a parking space while the city went about its business just feet away. How a grandmother in a flowered dress could become one of the most prolific killers in California history. And how, even now, decades later, we still don't know exactly how many people went into that house and never came out.